You'll make for an interesting video talking about what Wonder Woman 84 did to Patty Jenkins, what Rise of Skywalker did to J.J. Abrams, and what Thor: Love and Thunder's done to Taika Waititi. Not just in career opportunities, but their reputations as directors as well.
I don't know, like Taika Waititi just seems emboldened by it. Like,
well, yeah, but I was going to say that's the interesting thing, right? Patty Jenkins basically lost all of her career opportunities / gave up. JJ's disappeared. Nobody knows what the hell he's even doing anymore. And then Taika, he's just going on and making more stuff, but that he's gone now from being someone who, as far as I remember, I don't know how you guys feel, but rewind about 4 years or so, and people were like, "Yeah, Taika's awesome. Yeah, we'll check him out on this." Yeah. Now everyone's like, "Keep him away from everything, please."
Yeah.
The JJ one,
different results.
JJ was like juggling me along to silence. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, he's somehow managing.
I mean, whoever made Rise of Skywalker deserves to crawl into a little hole and leave his will.
We're all grateful for the silence.
It's a funny film. I'll give it that.
I mean,
somehow.
I honestly, I don't think I've seen it since the year it came out. Like, I've never watched it again all the way through because I just can't bring myself to do it.
Wacky film.
It's like, what would I guess if you had to pick, right? What do you consider the worst movie, TLJ or Rise of Skywalker?
Oh,
TLJ.
We've had this conversation so many times that I think you should include TFA. I think it's fair to pick any of the three. They're all catastrophic.
I'll throw that in there. Sure.
I mean, I'm inclined knee-jerk reaction to go for TLJ naturally, but honestly, like I feel like I could make a really strong argument for any of the three.
The Rise of Skywalker is a worse film. It's not even a proper film. It's bizarre, that movie. Where obviously I don't like The Last Jedi, and I've talked about that a lot, but it looks like someone that made a film that didn't like Star Wars, where the last one just looks like someone that doesn't know how to make films. Like, I would definitely say The Rise of Skywalker.
I think the only thing that not redeems it, but like perhaps like lifts it up slightly in my estimation is I can see what JJ was trying to do with Rise of Skywalker with so many of the stupid plot points and the throwaway lines and like the weird events. It's like I can see how you're trying to correct the mistakes of TLJ. I can see how you're trying to like rebuild something out of the rubble that Rian Johnson left you. What you've produced is still absolute garbage, but I feel like you were left with very few cards to play. And so I have a tiny bit of sympathy for him on that one. I don't have any sympathy for TFA or TLJ.
Yes, and I think we feel too that JJ like put his tail between his legs and he's gone home, shut the curtains. He just doesn't want to come out. Like he has some sense that it was a disaster. Where
with him, like projects and money, and then do that, and it's like, hey, and they poke in his house, like make something. Like, you've got to do something.
Would you think it was just that was the jig was up for him? Like he managed to maintain this veneer that he was like this visionary new filmmaker who this was the guy who resurrected Star Trek and he resurrected Star Wars, and you know, like he seemed to be the guy who just brought back dead franchises and somehow turned them into gold because they made bank. Like TFA, whether we think it's garbage or what, it made like $2 billion or whatever crazy amount it was. Yeah. Like, so it was hugely successful, and that's all the people in Hollywood ultimately care about. And so he probably had this incredible reputation up until The Rise of Skywalker. And that's just like, that's the film that finally exposed him for being a bit of a fucking like unimaginative hack who doesn't have any ideas.
Okay, I'm going to stick up for JJ a little bit here. I know that's not the thing to do, but I don't understand whoever was in charge of this trilogy. You had to move your hat just to
I'm
your head on. You were like, right. Whoever was in charge, maybe this was a Kathleen Kennedy decision. I don't know. I like to blame her for a lot of things, but that why would you have, different people running an entire trilogy and people who have very different visions for it on top of that? If from the beginning, JJ had been allowed to run all 3 movies, which I don't even know if he wanted to. So I'm not necessarily saying it's someone else's fault, but it, at least his original story made much more sense. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd heard that, you know, the reason that Rey was so powerful, so intuitively connected with the Force, was because Luke Skywalker was guiding her to come to him, to recover, you know, his lightsaber and come to him. And that was completely retconned, and you know, we got the mishmash of terrible ideas that was The Last Jedi. And I think that from there, then you go into it, and so it's like you taking on a franchise after a very successful 3 movies with the original trilogy is one thing, but then you having to rebuild from the absolute firestorm that is The Last Jedi is those are like 2 very difficult things. And I think if JJ had control from the beginning to the end, it wouldn't have been a great product, but it would have been adequate, and it wouldn't have been so destructive to characters like Luke Skywalker that it ended up being. So again, I just want to say I'm not a big fan of his, but I think he was working with pretty bad cards.
I think, you know, because as people like to point out, the original trilogy wasn't a cohesive story from start to finish either. It was very much the first movie was wildly successful beyond anyone's expectations, and so the reality was, okay, we need to tweak this story to incorporate certain things, or to work in characters that have been way more popular than we expected. And so we had to change the story. The difference, though, I think, is that they lucked out with the writers and the directors that they ultimately hired, people who really got what they were working with and understood how to integrate their new ideas into the existing story in a way that doesn't give the game away to the audience that, hey, we just changed a bunch of stuff from the original idea because we need to react to what the audience likes. The problem is they had exactly the wrong people on board with this new trilogy. I mean, you know, that was one of the problems. The other problem being, like, they didn't have a huge degree of imagination, even with TFA. Like, it was just, let's take the popular elements of Star Wars that people recognize and produce the most corporatized, safe, bland version of Star Wars that we can make. But it made money, you know, ultimately. And you could have used that as the building blocks of a good story if you were imaginative. Unfortunately, they got Rian Johnson, and he is exactly the wrong guy to be doing the middle movie of a trilogy. He is not a guy who can play ball and just set more building blocks in place for the subsequent stories. He just wants to divide people. He wants to produce, I guess, in his mind, thought-provoking movies that are going to divide the audience. That's exactly the opposite kind of guy you want to be doing a film like that. And that just set them on the path to destruction, ultimately.
Plus, the OT, like, they brought in other directors, but George was still there. They still, like, even though they were changing the story, they still had the original brain that the story came out of, working through it all. Here, just handing it to a completely different director, writer, not even connected to the first film. Didn't he start writing it, I think, before they'd even Force Awakens was released? That just seems like insanity. Like, how was that ever going to work? You know, it's not.
Well, I think we. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go.
We know it's true at this point that, like, there was no plan and everything. But even if one was to consider KK or whoever else at the top sort of shepherding the trilogy, they never really cared how they connected, right? They were just going to go as far as, like, it's Star Wars. This shit will make money. We just got to get directors who can make an entertaining experience. Because listening to all the behind the scenes stuff for TFA, it's such a thing of, like, we're just trying to make the audience feel like this is Star Wars. That's, like, the primary goal. There's no, like, we want to tell a wonderful story about these characters that we built up over a long time because they're going to be great for the Star Wars universe. It's no. We want you to feel like this is the OT. And it's always specifically the OT, because something that Disney have moved away from compared to when they started out with Star Wars was like, yeah, we hate the prequels too. Fuck the prequels. They're all like that. But, you know, these days they're like, we like the prequels. These are cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like Force Awakens was, like, just objectively, because I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, I remember sitting in the theater watching Force Awakens and just thinking, like, this movie feels like it was made by someone who is scared to try something. Because, like, foundationally, you know, it is a carbon copy of the original, just an even shittier version. You know, it's like what Marvel's doing with, like, C-list versions or, like, knockoff versions of the original Avengers.
It's something Gary points out a lot, but that first line of TFA is very deliberate. It's Max von Sydow, right, saying this will begin to make things right. It's like this recognition that Star Wars is damaged because of the prequels, and it's so funny to look back on that as a notion. Because whether or not you think the prequels are, however good, like they didn't destroy Star Wars as a like a money printing brand. If anything, they invigorated it.
Oh yeah, the merchandise and like the spin-off games and shows and stuff from the prequels were enormous.
And I mean, it's not like it's been just a few months or a year now. We've actually seen, like, with 2023, what's the sequel culture? What is the sequel fans? They're evaporating with every day that passes.
I keep hearing that in 10 years' time, people will love it as much as they love the prequels. But that 10 years is coming around faster than they imagine.
Yeah. I just think it's in 10 years that they love the OT, and a lot of people say they love the prequels. So then it'll be like, the sequels? Didn't they decanonize them?
Well, I think the litmus test will be, like, what's your attachment to the sequels and the characters within? Okay, well, they're going to apparently make a new Rey movie. Who's going to go watch that?
I will. I can.
Yeah, but like, we get paid to do it.
Just the YouTubers will go.
But, yeah, I can legit see that being the Marvels.
Yes.
It's just it will follow that same trajectory of it. No one cares about this anymore. This is just a holdover project from a completely different era. Nobody likes these characters, and it's just going to die a death.
And even the saturating on Disney Plus of Star Wars, getting people to again go to the cinema and be excited, it's going to be hard, even if the films are good. I think they've killed off the old fans, and now they're just saturated the new fans with the Ahsoka shit. And
what's funny is there's probably a crazy alternate universe where things like Solo and Rogue One, Rogue One did do well, but like Solo did super good, and it spawned like an entire plethora of like origin stories for every character. And like the Star Wars just became Marvelized. It became the new MCU. There is an alternate. That's exactly what they 100% wanted to do with it, and just turn it into a money printing machine.
Which is funny in retrospect, right? To Marvelize it, it's like, well, they kind of did because it's dead and Marvel's dead.
Yeah, that's right. But they skipped the profitable part, and they just got right to the end where it just goes.
Where's the money? What's happening?
They're like, you promised us money with this playbook.
It's like, you just gave us the bad bit.
Is there some of my family members and like friends I have as well? They'll be like, when if they ask me like, are you working on like a Star Wars new film, whatever, and it's like, hasn't been a new one since 2019. They're like, oh, no Star Wars since 2019? Oh, yeah. It's like, no, there's been loads of Star Wars. Yeah. It's just stuff that you've never heard of and don't care about. That's all.
Imagine holding the rights to that IP and not having released a movie in 4 years.
Yeah,
I know they're playing it like really safe with that, because I feel like they brought it to Disney Plus thinking that it was going to, like that would be the safe route and it wouldn't kill the franchise or anything because it's not in theaters, but it absolutely is.
It's like you've got when you make one of these Star Wars series on Disney Plus, right? Whether it's Ahsoka or like Obi-Wan or whatever, you've got all the expense of making a movie, like because they cost like in total for like 10 episodes or whatever, it'll be like a couple of $100 million, like the cost of a good movie. But you don't get any of the benefits. You don't get the box office revenue from it. Like it's entirely predicated on attracting new subscribers to Disney Plus, which isn't happening. And so, like, what's the point in making these shows? Like, they are lost leaders, but there's nothing to follow them up. That's
I find it fascinating too. Like, how many people are subscribed to Disney Plus, and then how many people actually watched Ahsoka or anything? And it's like, you obviously make these shows to keep your subscribers happy, but what's the percentage of your subscribers who are actually watching the show?
I honestly think if they release viewing figures for these shows, we would be shocked by how low they are.
Yeah, me too.
I really do.
What would be really cool is to get figures not only of like a general, but like really detailed. Like how long do they stay for on average? How long before people turn these episodes off? How long do they watch these seasons?
Well, didn't we find out I know this is not Star Wars, but like with Rings of Power, only like 35% of people actually watched it all the way to the end.
Yeah,
I honestly think that's more than I would have expected. Like, I'm surprised 35% got through the entire thing. Rings of Power is so empty.
Yeah. But that, I
But
mean, that's
maybe it's
that's
just
obviously
people who are staying strong and like falling asleep and going back and rewatching it.
That's actually a good point. It would count people who fell asleep, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
well, it would count people who like maybe they're trying for the people who have it on in the background while they're
on TikTok.
yeah, like
Yeah.
while they're flicking through their phone or whatever, and or eating their dinner, and it's like oh, it's just something in the background. I can look up occasionally and see some stuff
legit-
explode.
If I like put Netflix on, the homepage is up, and then I like want to go do something for a second in the room, and it starts like playing something in the background, I'm like, don't you fucking dare! That doesn't count. I'm not watching that.
Nice
You're never
trick.
getting my view.
I'm just
I take
showing
my
you.
view back.